I'm Stephen, I run EP Wiring. Today I'm at Dynatune in East Kilbride, fitting a wiring harness I made to Neil's 343 wheel horsepower Glanza V. At the moment he's still running the stock harness with a patch harness with a linked Monsoon X ECU. I'm going to show you how to remove your OEM harness, strip out the battery cables which we'll reuse, and then add the new harness which I supplied. These two plugs here are on the 98 cars onwards. These are for the alternator and for the battery. 96 and 97 models have ring terminals here instead. To remove the harness, all you really need is a flathead screwdriver, a pair of side cutters are handy, and a socket set for the ring terminals on the starter, the alternator, and in the fuse box if you've got 96 or 97 car. You want to be careful not to break any of these clips because we'll reuse most of these for resecuring the new harness in place. This one here I'm unravelling the tape for it because we're going to reuse this one by cable tying the new harness onto it. On the inside of the 98 and 99 cars you've got two body connectors here and two ECU plugs, slightly different on the 96 and 97 models. With these unplugged we can start pulling it through from the engine bay side. The stock harness is quite bulky, it's got all the splice connectors taped up underneath the airbox. They get caught in things, so just take your time when you're pulling it out. If it gets a snag, go back in the car and see if you can undo the snag within the car. And just take your time and out it will come. From the firewall connector, unplug any of the remaining plugs from the windscreen wiper, the injectors, alternator and starter, etc. And here we have the harness out of the car. And here are the two plugs that we want to keep. Like I say, in the 96, 97 cars it will be ring terminals, but you'll see the big heavy gauge wire. And you can see along here we need to split this out. Part of it goes over to the battery post. And we want to keep that. And then follow this back down and you'll see it goes along here. It splits out. And you've got your connector there for your starter motor. And then one for your alternator as well. So now we'll start stripping the wiring harness and keeping these parts. You'll obviously want to be really careful here that you don't nick any of the wires using the side cutters or the stanley blades. I've done this a few times so I know how far I can go with that, but just take your time and be careful. And that's them finally separated. It's not too big a job, takes a little bit of time. To be honest, you could do it without any cutting tools. You could just unravel all the tape. It does take a little bit longer, but probably the safest way to do it. Here are all the little clips as well that you want to hold on to because we were reusing them when we put it all back in the car. Here we've got the fan switch connector. Normally I wouldn't keep the OEM fan switch. I usually just set it to an output on the ECU and run that straight to the fuse box. On the 98, 99 cars you can do that. On the 96, 97 ones, this fan switch is actually built into the chassis harness or the part that's on the bottom of the fuse box. But this is me just showing you how to depin the connector, because I had the terminals and seals in stock, so I can do that and then just reuse this connector because it was in good shape. The pin in the connector is just the opposite. You push the terminal in, it clips, and you put the wee lock and tab back in. This is the little cover for the alternator ring terminal. I never got to shoot much footage fitting the new harness, but at this point I've put back the battery cables and the new harness, and I'm just showing you me clipping this back on. It's quite important to keep this because it protects it. Now you can see the new harness sort of loosely in place. Some of it's cable tied. You see there in the corner next to the original fuse box is an aftermarket fuse box. Totally optional, you don't have to run this. Some people do decide to put one in just to refresh all the power wiring for the ECU and the injectors. This little igniter can come out of here now. Now for the most important but probably most overlooked part of an install of a wiring harness is the cable ties. So important that it makes sure that it's all cable tied together, so it's not going to be flapping about putting unnecessary strain on the harness. These two connectors are for future additions to the car. You've got a flex fuel sensor, and you've got a coolant pressure sensor or a fuel pressure sensor depending on what Neil wants to do. The connector, I set it up so it's got enough length to run to both. You can see it can go into here. It can also go over here, the fuel pressure sensor if need be. You can see here where we can just cable tie this part of the harness on, and that will secure that in place.